She slapped her back. A black nurse. An American woman standing in a foreign country, bleeding from her cheek, in the middle of a hospital corridor. And she did not cry, did not beg, did not apologize. She looked the most powerful woman in that building dead in the eye and said, "That child deserved better, so do I." Those 12 words cost Mrs. Choi Yeonhee everything. But here's the part that nobody saw coming. Nobody except the man sitting silently in the waiting room across the hall. The man in the dark suit who watched the whole thing happen without blinking. The man whose hands were so still, so controlled, that his bodyguard later said it was the calmest he had ever seen his boss in a moment of absolute fury. Because that man, that was Kwon Seokhyun. And the little boy in the orange wheelchair that Mrs. Choi had called unsettling, the 7-year-old with the crooked smile and the bright eyes, who was just sitting there minding his own business when that woman opened her mouth. That boy was his son, his only son, Kwon Seokhyun, the man who controlled more of Seoul's underground economy than any government report would ever dare to confirm. The man whose name made business rivals go pale at dinner tables. The man who had not raised his voice in 7 years because he had never needed to, because in Seoul, his silence was louder than most men's screams. He watched a nurse he had never met in his life step between his son and a bully without a single second of hesitation. No calculation, no self-preservation. She just moved, like it was the only thing a decent human being could do. And then he watched that bully hit her across the face with a diamond-studded hand. He made one phone call. One. And within 72 hours, Choi Yeonhee, wife of a billionaire, darling of Seoul's elite social circuit, woman who had never once faced a consequence in her 51 years on this earth, lost her reputation, her board seats, her social standing, and very nearly her husband's entire empire. But the revenge is not even the most powerful part of this story. The most powerful part is what Kwon Seokhyun did next. What he built. What he said to a nurse from Minnesota on a balcony overlooking the Seoul skyline at 2 a.m. What a 7-year-old boy with cerebral palsy drew on a piece of paper and handed to a woman who had risked everything for him without even knowing his name. This is the story of what happens when someone finally protects the protector, and it starts with a slap. Welcome to our channel. If you are brand new here, hit that subscribe button right now. We drop Afro-Korean romance stories, and we do not hold back. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from, whether it is the UK, Canada, the US, or anywhere else in the world, because we shout out names in every single video. And if you have been here before, welcome back. Now let us get into this because I promise you, this story is going to stay with you. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary in every way, except that it was about to become the most extraordinary day in 3 different people's lives. Nurse Jordan Reeves had been on her feet since 6 that morning. 11 hours in, 2 critical cases handled, 1 very difficult family meeting navigated with grace, and she was in the middle of updating a patient chart when she heard it. Not a shout, not a crash, just words. Words delivered loudly, casually, in the kind of Korean that Jordan understood completely. The kind that wealthy people use when they want to be heard but do not believe anyone worth worrying about is listening. Why do they put children like this in the good wards? It is unsettling for real patients. Jordan looked up. The woman who said it was standing in the middle of the corridor in a caramel-colored designer coat, handbag swinging, eyes sweeping the ward like she owned it. She was looking at a little boy in a motorized wheelchair, orange cast on his left arm, wide, dark eyes, or a half-eaten cookie in his right hand, who had just heard every single word. Jordan watched the little boy's face change, watched the brightness in it dim, watched him look down at his lap with the particular expression that children develop when the world has reminded them, cruelly and without warning, that some people will never fully see them. She had seen that expression before. She had worn it herself. She set down the chart. She walked 6 feet down that corridor. She placed herself directly between the woman in the caramel coat and the little boy's wheelchair, and she looked that woman in the eye and said in clear, firm Korean, "That child is my patient, and you will not speak about him that way in this hospital." The woman, Mrs. Choi Yeonhee, though Jordan did not know her name yet, stared at her like she had just watched a chair stand up and start talking back. "Excuse me," she said, cold and precise. "Do you know who I am?" "I know what you just said," Jordan replied, "and I know it was wrong." What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Mrs. Choi's hand, the one loaded with the diamond bracelet, the platinum rings, the Cartier wristwatch, came across Jordan's face so fast that Jordan did not even flinch in time. The sound cracked down the corridor like a gunshot. Jordan stumbled back into the wall. Her hand flew to her cheek. She tasted blood inside her lip. The fluorescent lights above her swam for just a moment before her training kicked back in and steadied her. The ward went absolutely silent. And in that silence, Jordan Reeves, bleeding, upright, chin level, looked at Choi Yeonhee and said the 12 words that would echo through Seoul for the next 3 months. "That child deserved better, and so do I." Across the hall in the waiting area, a man in a dark suit stood up slowly from his chair. His bodyguard reached for his arm. The man shook him off. He took out his phone. He dialed one number. He spoke 4 words. "Find everything on her." And the world Choi Yeonhee had built over 51 years began, quietly and inevitably, to come apart. To understand why Jordan did what she did, you need to know where she came from. Jordan Reeves grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, North Minneapolis specifically, a neighborhood that did not make the tourism brochures, but made you tough in ways that could not be faked. Her mother, Claudette Reeves, worked as a home health aide for 23 years. Her father drove a city bus. They were not wealthy. They were not connected. But they were the kind of people who showed up for their community, their church, their kids, every single time. Jordan was the first person in her family to get a master's degree. She graduated top of her nursing class. She passed her boards without a single attempt to spare. And when the opportunity came to join a medical exchange program in Seoul, she said yes before she had fully read the details, because she believed deeply and stubbornly that good work is good work anywhere in the world. Korea taught her otherwise. Not completely, but enough. In 2 years at Seoul Grand Medical Center, Jordan Reeves had been overlooked in handoff meetings, talked past in patient consultations, and second-guessed by residents who had a fraction of her experience. Patients had asked for different nurses. Colleagues had mispronounced her name for 4 months straight, even after she corrected them. She had stood in break rooms and understood every word of conversation she was not supposed to understand. She had swallowed all of it, every day, with professionalism and grace and a quiet fury that she channeled into being the best nurse on that ward. She had never once raised her voice, until a woman in a caramel coat looked at a 7-year-old boy in a wheelchair and called him unsettling. Some things you can swallow, and some things you cannot. And Jordan Reeves had learned a long time ago, watching her mother care for people who could not always advocate for themselves, that the children are always the line. You do not cross the children. Hospital security arrived. The administrator arrived. Jordan was separated into one conference room with an ice pack and a colleague who kept whispering that she should press charges. Mrs. Choi was placed in another room, already on her phone, already managing it, already treating the situation like a PR problem rather than a crime. The administrator apologized to Mrs. Choi. Jordan watched that happen from behind the glass and felt something cold and very clear settle over her. She was sent home early, told to rest, offered a vague promise that the incident would be reviewed. She went home. She cleaned her face. The cut from the bracelet was not deep, but the bruise was going to be ugly for days. She sat on her couch in her apartment and did not cry. Not right away. She just sat there in the quiet, in the particular exhaustion of someone who has been strong for too long in too many rooms. And then her phone rang. Unknown number, Seoul area code. She almost let it go to voicemail. She answered. Miss Reeves. The voice on the other end was low, steady, and precise, in a way that made her sit up straighter without knowing why. My name is Kwon Seokhyun. I was present at the hospital today. I believe we were in the same corridor. Jordan went very still. I know who you are, she said, because she did not know who he was, but she knew the type of person whose presence in a waiting room comes with its own gravity. I want you to know, he said, that what happened to you today will not go unanswered. Is that a promise or a threat? She asked. A pause. A short breath that might possibly have been a laugh. Both, he said, depending on who you're asking about. Another pause, longer. The boy, he said quietly. Min-jae, he is mine. He is my son. Stop. Let that land for a second. The boy with the orange cast, the 7-year-old with the brilliant crooked smile who had been sitting in that corridor minding his own business, eating his cookie, living his life. The child whose face had crumpled when a woman in designer clothing looked at him like he was a problem. The boy that Jordan Reeves had stepped in front of without a single thought for what it might cost her. His father was on the phone, and his father was Kwon Seokhyun. Now, if you have never heard that name, let me tell you what it means in Seoul. It means that the most respected and feared man in the city's underground had watched a foreign nurse, a woman with no money, no connections, no power, put herself between his disabled child and someone's cruelty. And then he had watched that same woman get struck across the face and stand back up and say, that child deserved better, and so do I. He had watched all of it, from 15 feet away, without moving, without blinking. And in that moment, Kwon Seokhyun, a man who had not felt surprised by another human being in over a decade, was completely, utterly undone. What he did next changed every life in this story. Do not go anywhere. Kwon Seokhyun's people were thorough. That was one of the things about operating at that level in Seoul. When you needed information, you got it fast, and you got all of it. Within 20 minutes of the incident, his team had already begun pulling the thread on Choi Yeonhee, and what they found was not surprising. It was just extensive. A Filipino domestic worker dismissed without pay and without reference after filing a complaint about verbal abuse. A Vietnamese delivery driver harassed and reported 3 times by the same household. A pattern of behavior at restaurants. The whisper network among service staff knew her name and passed warnings about it like a shield. A long-documented reputation for treating people she considered beneath her as less than human. A pattern, not a moment of maternal stress. A pattern that stretched back years and had never once faced a consequence, because Choi Yeonhee moved through a world where people like her did not face consequences. Until now. Hour 12. Seoul Grand Medical Center released an official statement standing fully behind Jordan Reeves and condemning the incident in language that was professional, clear, and very final. The hospital administrator who had apologized to Mrs. Choi the day before did not comment publicly. Hour 14. Mrs. Choi's social media, 180,000 followers, a perfect curated gallery of charity galas and luxury travel, published an apology. Detailed, named, specific. Not the vague, performative kind. The kind written by someone who has been told very clearly that this is the minimum required and that anything less will result in something much worse. The comments were immediate and they were relentless. 50,000 in 6 hours. The hashtag trended in Seoul before noon. Hour 24. The Seoul Women's Philanthropy Circle Board called and accepted her resignation. She had not offered it. They had called her. Hour 36. A government contract held by Choi D6 Company went into administrative review. No explanation was provided publicly. None was needed in the circles where it mattered. Hour 48. A journalist published a meticulously sourced piece on the pattern of behavior. Anonymous sources, documented complaints, names of people who had been silenced or paid off over the years. It went viral. Hour 60. The International Women's Foundation removed her from their board. No statement, no explanation, just gone. Hour 72. 3 charity gala invitations were rescinded. She was removed from group chats she had been part of for over a decade. Her social media engagement collapsed. Seoul's elite social circuit, which had welcomed her for 20 years, quietly closed its doors. She went from untouchable to cautionary tale in 3 days, and Kwon Seokhyun had not raised his voice once. Jordan called him back the next morning. She had decided somewhere around 3 in the morning while staring at the ceiling that if she was going to be part of this story, she was going to do it with her eyes open. I want to know what you're planning, she said. No greeting. She was from Minnesota. She did not have patience for the kind of conversation that takes 20 minutes to get to the point. He answered her directly. She appreciated that. They talked for 40 minutes that first morning. About what had happened, about what he had done and why, about Min-jae, his age, his condition, the accident 3 years ago that had killed Min-jae's mother and changed everything, about what it meant to raise a child with a disability in a country where people like Mrs. Choi said things like that out loud in hospital corridors and expected no one to respond. He asks about you, Seokhyun said during that first call. Every day since it happened. He wants to know if you are okay. Jordan had to look at the ceiling for a moment. Tell him I'm fine. Tell him he doesn't need to worry about me. I told him that already, Seokhyun said. He said he knows, but he wants to tell you himself. She met Min-jae 2 weeks later at a small park near the hospital. He came in his wheelchair with his father beside him, and when he saw her, he broke into the biggest, most unself-conscious smile she had ever seen in her life. He handed her a drawing he had made. A nurse and a boy, stick figures, slightly uneven because his hand did not always do what he told it to, but drawn with total confidence. Near the boy in the drawing was surrounded by what Min-jae explained very seriously were stars, because he said the nurse had been like a star, bright when everything was dark. Jordan folded that drawing and put it in her pocket and did not speak for 30 seconds. She looked up and found Seokhyun watching her from a few feet away. His expression for once was completely unguarded. No walls, no control. Just a man looking at a woman who had been kind to his child and feeling everything that comes with that. They started talking more after that. Every day, then twice a day. She told him about Minneapolis, about her mother Claudette, about the neighborhood she grew up in and the patients she had fought for, and the 2 years of indignities she had swallowed in Seoul, with a smile on her face. He told her about Min-jae's therapy, about his favorite books, about the way he announced plans with the absolute conviction of someone who expects the world to cooperate. He told her, one evening on her apartment balcony with Seoul, lit up below them, about the accident. I sat in a hospital that night, he said quietly, and I listened to doctors talk about probabilities and prognosis and long-term outcomes. And I went home and I did not know what to do, and I have never told anyone that before. What happened? Jordan asked. Min-jae happened, he said. He woke up and he wanted to know where his wheelchair was, so he could go to the window. That was his first question. Not about pain, not about what was wrong with him. He wanted to get to the window to see if it had snowed. He stopped, looked at the city. That child has been teaching me what courage looks like since the day he could talk, he said. And then I watched a stranger with nothing to gain and everything to lose stand up for him without blinking. And I thought, he found his people. Even in Seoul, he found his people. Here is the part of the story that most people do not tell. Because revenge is exciting and destruction is dramatic, but what Kwon Seokhyun did with the aftermath was neither of those things. It was quieter, and it was far more powerful. He came to Jordan one evening with a large envelope. Inside were property deeds, business licenses, and architectural plans. A community health center in Itaewon, fully funded, designed specifically to serve foreign workers, migrants, and families with disabled members. Free and low-cost care, to staff required to complete cultural competency training, signs in 5 languages, Korean, English, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Nepali. I want you to run the clinical program, he said. A few days a week, whatever time you can give. You would have full authority over the medical side of operations. Jordan stared at the plans for a long time. Why? She finally asked. Because you turn pain into purpose, he said simply. And because the next nurse who does what you did for my son should not have to do it in a system that fails the people who need the most protection. I want to build that system, and I need someone who knows what it should look like from the inside. She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who most of Seoul was afraid of. He's standing in her living room holding architectural plans for a community health center like it was the most natural thing in the world. Everyone expects powerful men to destroy, she said. I know, he said. I spent a long time giving them what they expected. The Minjae Community Health Center opened on a Saturday morning 8 weeks later, modern and welcoming, flooded with natural light, a waiting room that did not feel like punishment, children's play area in the corner, coffee station by the entrance, every sign in 5 languages. Jordan stood at the ribbon cutting with Seokhyun beside her, and Minjae in his wheelchair between them, wearing a little bow tie that he had picked out himself. The first patient through the door was a Filipino woman with 3 children who had been afraid to seek care for months because every time she tried, she had been met with impatience or contempt or a language barrier that nobody helped her navigate. She walked through that door and started crying before she had even reached the front desk. Jordan went to her, sat beside her, said, in the gentle, steady voice of a woman who has been doing this since she was 22 years old, "You're in the right place now. We see you here. I promise." Across the room, Kwon Seokhyun watched that happen, and something in his face that had been tightly held for a very long time went soft. It was 2 months after the health center opened. Late on a Thursday night, they were on her balcony again. They had claimed that balcony, both of them, as the place where the real conversations happened, and the city was quiet below them in the way Seoul is only quiet after midnight. "I need to tell you something," he said. Jordan looked at him. "I am not an easy person to be close to," he began. "The world I operate in is not safe in the conventional sense. I have kept people at a distance for years because I told myself it was the responsible thing, the protective thing." He looked at his hands. "I am very good at telling myself things that are not true." "What is true?" Jordan asked. He looked up. "The most important thing that has happened to me in years," he said slowly, "was watching a woman from Minnesota decide that a child she had never met was worth her job, her safety, her blood. And the second most important thing was realizing that losing that woman because I was too guarded to say something would be the most cowardly thing I have ever done." Jordan was quiet for a moment. The city hummed below them. A light breeze came off the river. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I did not come to Korea looking for power or protection. I came to do good work, and I'm going to keep doing it with or without any of this." She looked at him steadily. "What I need from a partner is not someone who destroys my enemies. It is someone who helps me build something that means that enemies become irrelevant. Can you be that person?" Kwon Seokhyun, the man who had made police investigations disappear with a phone call, who had dismantled a woman's entire social world in 72 hours, who had never once in his adult life been asked to define himself by what he built rather than what he controlled, looked at Jordan Reeves and said, "I've been trying to be that person since the day I watched you stand up in that corridor. I'm just grateful you are willing to wait while I figure out how." Minji turned 8 years old on a Sunday in April. He had his birthday party at the community health center. His idea, because he said it was the best building he knew and the people there were his friends now. Jordan brought him a book about a young black girl who becomes a scientist. She had found it at a bookshop in Itaewon run by a Ghanaian woman who had lived in Seoul for 15 years. Minjae tore off the wrapping and announced with the absolute authority of a child who expects to be taken seriously that this was the best present he had ever received. He had decided, he informed everyone present, that he was going to be a scientist who invented faster and better wheelchairs, so that kids like him would not have to wait so long for equipment that actually worked. Everyone in that room applauded. Seokhyun quietly funded 3 wheelchair accessibility research grants the following week. He did not mention it. Jordan found out 2 months later through a mutual contact and called him immediately. "You could have told me," she said. "I know," he said. "I did not do it for you to know. I did it because Minjae asked why wheelchairs were so expensive, and it was a fair question." She did not respond right away. He could hear her smiling through the phone. "You're going to be impossible to keep up with," she said. "Probably," he agreed. And as for Mrs. Choi Yeonhee, she completed 6 months of mandated volunteer work at a disability advocacy center in Seoul. By all accounts, the first 2 months were uncomfortable for everyone. The 3rd month, something shifted. A child there reminded her of her own daughter at that age. She stopped performing remorse and started feeling it. She is not a different person, but she is a slightly better one. And that is the kind of justice that actually lasts. Here's what this story is really about. Power used to destroy is loud and fast and satisfying in the moment. But power used to build, to create something that protects the next person, that turns pain into purpose, that makes sure what happened to you cannot as easily happen to someone else. That kind of power is quiet and it lasts. Jordan Reeves did not step into that corridor because she had power. She did it because she had been raised to believe that some things cannot be let go, that children are the line, that dignity is not negotiable, that the right thing does not wait for a convenient moment. She had nothing behind her when she took those 6 steps. No title, no backup, no guarantee that anyone in that corridor would support her. She had herself. She had what her mother had poured into her. She had 23 years of watching Claudette Reeves show up for other people without a single expectation of anything in return. And it turned out that was exactly enough. You do not need power to do the right thing. You just need to decide that the right thing cannot wait. If this story hit different for you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. We worked hard on this one and your support means everything. Subscribe to the channel because next week we are dropping the story of Jordan's first real argument with Seokhyun, the one where she threatened to go back to Minneapolis and meant it, and where Min-jae did something so unexpectedly wise that neither of his parents could say a single word for a full minute. Trust me, you do not want to miss that. Drop a comment right now and tell us, have you ever stood up for someone when you had nothing to gain from it? What happened? We read every single comment and we will be shouting you out in next week's video. Until then, remember, courage does not wait for protection, and the right person will always notice.